So today I'm brewing the Gruit, finally. I had to substitute a couple the grains that I didn't have or we don't have available to us over on this side of the pond. I'll post the recipe up on my BrewToad account, and I'll put a link to that down in the description. But basically, the main ingredient that we can't find over here is honey malt. So I know I'm using the Imelodius recipe. Both Imelodius did this, BH Brewing has done this recipe, so hasn't Dan ABA and some others that are talking about it over on 17crew.com. 17brew.com. Yeah, 17brew. So on this one, since I don't have honey malt, I'm doing the substitute with biscuit malt instead. I was able to get Cara Red, Melanoian, and also Golden Promise. I only had 4 kilos of Golden Promise. I was going to go for 5. So instead I sort of substituted that with 1 kilo of Maris Otter. There we go. So yeah, let me go ahead and show you. I've already mashed in, so I can show you that, and then I'll show you the herbs that I'll be using. Mash temps today are 66 degrees. So the HLT is currently 66. HLT is 66, and the mash temp is 66. So everything's good to go. I've been mashing in for about 15 minutes here, and everything's looking good. You guys are probably getting sick and tired of me saying this, but pretty much to show you the setup. HLT with the coil in it. Got the water coming out into the pump, coming out the top, going back into the top of the HLT to recycle the water. And then in the mash tun, I've got it coming out, going into the pump, back up in to the coil of the HLT, maintaining a constant temperature of that 66 degrees as it goes back into the mash tun, the top of the mash tun. As it settles down, it gets slightly cooler, but then comes out and gets reheated up again. So over the course of the next, the first 20 minutes, everything comes into the same temperature, and then it stays that way for the duration of the hour. And then after that, we'll be putting it over into the boil kettle. So not the hot bill, but instead of today, I'm using just herbs. So I got a stack of heather tips over here, in Norway known as ling. I got chamomile here and here. Not sure exactly how much I'm going to be using. I do know how much, but not off the top of my head. Got some hibiscus flowers here. I'm going to be using Damiana organic leaf. I'm also going to be using some yarrow. I got some fresh yarrow that I'll be bringing in as well. And we've got a couple packets here of mugwort. Got some older mugwort, some newer mugwort. So yeah, that's the ingredients I'm going to be using for bittering, flavoring, and aroma. No hops in this recipe. Alright, so I just switched things around a bit. So now the HLT, I got the water coming out, down the pump, back up again, going into the coil, pushing out all of the sweet wort out of the coil, and then sparging the mash tun. From the mash tun, I got it coming out to the bottom of the pump, up to the top, coming into the boil kettle, getting ready to boil. That's a pretty good looking color right there. That's actually quite nice. I'm very happy with that. Sparging should take about anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour. And then we'll be bringing this thing up to a boil. Put the water coming out of the mash tun. Sparge water. Pushing it right around, keeping it about an inch over the grain bed. That's looking pretty good. Alright, so for this Gruit, let's go over the additions. Here's my 40-minute edition. Quite a bit of stuff going on in there. I'll take a look at the brew sheet actually, so we can explain this. Got one at 40 minutes, 20 minutes, at 15 minutes got the Whirlflock tablet and yeast nutrient, and then some more 5-minute additions for the actual spices or herbs. There's also, you can see a little secret ingredient down there. I've heard some stories about people talking about some astringency with the Gruit, and you know, they used just a little bit of hops in the very beginning just to sort of offset the big old sweetness that it's not desired nowadays. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere to that advice. I know that Imoladius had used sterling for this. I'm going to actually go with something a little bit more fruity. So I've heard good things about Mosaic, so I'm going to go ahead and use Mosaic. So this is the bill. So at 40 minutes we're bringing in some 14 grams of heather tips, 14 grams of mugwort, 14 grams of yarrow, and also 10 grams of Damiana. Then at the 20-minute time, we're going to go ahead and introduce the hibiscus, the yellow flower petals, and then also 10 grams of chamomile, and 7 grams of heather tips, and also 7 grams of mugwort. Also 7 grams of yarrow. Then we'll do the Whirlflock and yeast nutrient. Then at 10 minutes, we're going to bring in 10 more grams of chamomile, and then at the 5-minute mark we're going to bring in 14 grams of hibiscus, 10 grams of chamomile, 10 grams of Damiana, and also 7 grams of heather tips and 7 more grams of mugwort, also 7 grams of yarrow. So yeah, that's what we're looking at for today's Gruit. I know that Imoladius had suggested using Denny's favorite yeast from Y Yeast, but I actually didn't have that available to me, so I got the California Ale 5 instead. It's supposed to leave off some fruity esters, so I'm hoping that will benefit. I've never used this yeast before, so I'll actually be very interested to see how it behaves. So yeah, that's today's brew. Alright, so just had to take another shot of that as it's filling up. Man, look at that color. That's just awesome. Alright, so we've just reached the 40-minute mark. We're 20 minutes into the boil. So, time to go ahead and add in our first 40-minute addition. There we go. All that heather, Damiana, mugwort. Nice. Give that a little bit of a stir. Put that in there. Wow. Oh wow. The smell of that is just amazing. Never smelled anything like that. Holy moly. Yep, that's the first of 3 additions. Okay, just hitting the 40-minute mark. Time to add in the next addition. So here we go. 20-minute addition. Got some chamomile in this one. Sweet. It's just awesome. Trying to smell that. Got some hibiscus in there this time. Wow. That is delightful. Cool. And last but not least, here comes the 5-minute additions. Awesome. Just awesome. Okay, so before I set up the wort chiller to cool things down, I've got it coming out of the bottom of the kettle through the pump and back up in the top to do sort of a whirlpool, just to make sure I don't get anything in the hose that could plug up the wort chiller. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of whirlpool for a couple minutes just to make sure all the big chunks are, blocking up the holes around the filter, and then I'll go ahead and hook it up to the plate chiller and start to put it into a fermenter. Okay, so worst case scenario is the plate chiller would get blocked, and it did. So at least this time I get to test my theory. So what do we got going on? We got the wort coming out of the boil kettle through the pump, going through the coil in the HLT, which is now filled with cold water, and coming back in, recycling into the top, and bringing the temperature down to something reasonable. If we look at the temperatures now, we can see that the temperature inside the HLT is 26 degrees and slowly rising, and the temperature inside the boil kettle is 40 degrees and slowly dropping. So that's where we're at. I'm probably going to have to fill up the HLT one more time with cold water. It's about 12 degrees here, and that'll bring the temperature in the boil kettle down even more faster. So at least we see that this concept works, but I'm probably going to end up losing about at least half a gallon to 3/4 of a gallon of wort in the plate chiller. We'll see what I can do to salvage some of that, but that's where it's at. It ain't pretty, but here it is. Coming out of the boil kettle through the pump, up through the coil in the HLT, out of there, down into the fermentation bucket. So it'll be interesting to see how much we get. Alright, so no brew day is complete without showing you the aftermath. And this is what it is. I mean, there's just all kinds of sludge here inside this kettle. So I'm going to have it tilted up, take a couple things down there. All kinds of sludge. Wow. All in all, I got out 21 liters. 20 liters actually, yeah. So I'll show that to you in a second. But yeah. Oh, the aftermath. I'll show you the key thing that was the problem was on these valves here. So for the cam locks coming off, and then I've got this valve here. Now these are okay. It's a 1/2 inch and they've got a wide opening, so the gee-dunk would flow through there. But with the cam lock without the valve on it, right? So it's just a built-in valve here. This thing is much smaller, so it had a problem letting all of the trub through. So that was probably one of the biggest issues. So all the hoses that I had to use to go from the kettle up into the wort or the HLT to cool it down, I had to use the bigger barb valves. So at least I had all of those hooked up and on my hoses already, except for a couple exceptions, and that's one of them right there. So yeah, all in all, I got what I was hoping. I was shooting for 6 gallons, which is 23 liters. I came out with 20 liters plus a liter and a half on the starter. And, you know, that's close enough. I hit my numbers exactly. So it's exactly 1.065, which is what I was aiming for. So I'm very happy about that. Another day. Alright, so here's the starter. It's a 1.5 liter starter. The trick basically is to take another magnet, put it on the bottom so it takes a hold of the stir bar so it doesn't fall in when you pour it in. It smells unlike any other thing I've ever smelled beer related. It's just awesome. There. And stir bars at the bottom so it doesn't fall in. So you can see that we're 22 liters. So just 1 liter shy of the target. 6 US gallons or 5 imperial gallons. Okay, before I cap the lid, just there it is in all its glory. Smelling awesome. I'll cap this down and call it a night. And here we are about 15 hours after the brew. Fermentation is underway, going really nice. Had a crown's been starting to build up there just after 4 hours. So pretty interesting. We'll see how this one turns out.